Welcome, everyone. I'm going to wait like one more minute at the most. But while I'm waiting, I just want to welcome you to our professional development week. And today I'm going to be talking about Section 5. I'm super excited. So while I'm getting ready, I'm going to share my screen. Actually, I think before I share my screen, I'm going to share some other things. So, okay. Along the way, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and use the chat. And one of our teachers who's on will help to answer any questions. Okay, I'm going to get started now. Welcome. I am Kim Bredberg, and I am one of the founders and authors of the Blackbird and Company curriculum. I've been using this particular methodology that we have developed for close to 30 years and have seen wonderful results. Our method really is tied to the Renaissance. And one of the things that we believe is that writing is an art form. And so we try to pull in as much creativity into our longitudinal method as we can. And what that means is with our core integrated literature and writing units, we have they are 5-week units. Children will utilize 6 of these units over the course of a year. And on the 5th week of each of the core units, we stop, we take a breath, and we take everything we've gleaned from that novel and we apply it to a creative project. And in doing so, we are strengthening the students' idea-making capacity. And that idea-making capacity definitely not only transfers to the art of writing, but it also is actually part of the art itself. Without ideas, writing would be a useless pursuit. Ideas are what we want to communicate. So during Section 5, students come up with an idea that shares what they believe was most significant about the story they just read. In order to start this, we recommend that during week 2 or it has to be week 2, right? During week 2, you start suggesting, are you thinking about Section 5 ideas? Why don't you use a sketchbook? And why don't you sketch some of those ideas? So it's always good to have a sketchbook around the house, just a blank book for the student to sketch ideas into. On our website, at the orange bar at the top of the homepage, you'll see the word free stuff or the phrase free stuff. If you click there, we're going to have a Section 5 planning sheet. It's really good to actually start organizing your ideas in the same way if you were going to write a paragraph. You might do a topic wheel. When you're doing a creative project, you want to do the same type of planning. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about micro projects. And this idea of constraining ideas in a small setting is a really important art-making principle. When you constrain your ideas, then you have to shave off all of the extraneous, extra, jumbly interference that will compete with this idea. So when it comes to making visual art, when it comes to writing, constraint is a really good practice. In our level 4 units, we actually require students each week to write a synopsis and write a personal reflection that is constrained by word count. So the synopsis is 150 words, the reflection is 400 or 300 words. And when you constrain something, it actually forces you to make each word count. In poetry, both of our poetry units, Introduction to Poetry, small form poetry especially, will utilize constraint. You have to constrain an idea to a form. So you're writing a haiku, that's a particular form. You're writing a sonnet, that's a particular form. So constraint is everywhere in writing. And so using a constraint, making a micro section 5 is going to build skills that will be directly transferable to writing. So I want to just share with you, I kind of keep a whole bunch of little boxes around the house. And these are really easy to find. You can find them at Michael's. This one actually happened to be a little jewelry box that I got something in. And I never throw this away because you never know what that little piece of batting might do for a project. So I collect all of these boxes, but you know, sometimes I'm collecting boxes and they're going to still have the tags on them. And this one is interesting because it stays attached. I like that one. And we're going to want to prepare these boxes. You don't want, you know, to just glue something on top of this. I'm going to show you some ways, simple ways to prepare. So here's another wonderful box. I kind of like that this one is gold on the edges. And I might suggest, keep the bottom gold, do something with the top. This little box, you can tell it's a box like this, but when I was looking at it, I imagined gluing them together and having a shallow bottom and a shallow top and a deeper bottom. I thought, that would be a fun little section 5 project. But here's my favorite box that I found that came to me this summer. And so it's very small, you know, look how thin and cute it is, but watch this. It's a drawer. I can imagine having so much fun creating a section 5 with that little drawer. So you want to collect these little tiny micro boxes and give your student a choice. And tell them that this project is going to be contained. Now, the first thing that I say when I'm, presenting the start point for this micro section 5 is I want you to remember that you're communicating a very specific idea with this project. You want to communicate to your audience why this book is meaningful. Why should I read this book? And a good place to start is to ask yourself the question as you're planning, how were you wowed? How were you wowed by the story? And that will get some ideas flowing. But the other thing is, ask yourself the question, why did the author write this story? Why was this story, it's because it takes a lot of effort to create a story, right? It's not just give me a pad of paper and I write, and then I send it to a publisher. It's a long time. It takes, months, it takes years to create a story and get it to published point. So I want to talk about how that idea making starts and give you some kind of an outline. So I'm going to share my screen here. And so you should be seeing the first page of my little PowerPoint. So section 5 is a creative opportunity. And I'm going to talk about the book From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Lee Frankweiler. This was one of my favorite books as a child. It was published way back in 1967. So it was it was a fairly new book by the time I was able to read it. It probably had been on the market, 10 years or so. But oh, it just delighted me. And I'm sure I read it more than once as a child, and I've definitely read it more than once as an adult. So so the thing that I think is really the thing that wows me about this story is that Claudia and Jamie scoot off to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And this is where this story takes place, inside this museum. And this really lit up my curiosity as a child. So the setting is the most important thing to me about this novel. It may not be for another reader. There might be something else that is important to another reader. But it's the setting. So I'm imagining, being 10, 11, 12 years old and thinking, I want to convey the setting, but I'm super overwhelmed because the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I can't draw very well. How am I going to communicate that? And especially, how am I going to communicate that on a tiny, tiny little box? Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is I need to brainstorm. And so I often talk to my students about the word fodder. Fodder is a great word. It is a word that is super important for artists, but it's also a word that is super important for writers. Writers need fodder to be able to get their ideas on the page. And fodder is just a word that means food. And it's derived from feeding animals. So hay is fodder for cattle. But ideas need fodder. So, bring this word into the lexicon of your students. And as you begin to encourage them and cheerlead them into the Section 5 process, say, let's get some fodder. Let's gather some fodder. Now, you don't have to be afraid of drawing. No one has to be afraid of drawing. Everyone can draw. Drawing is just picking up your pen, your pencil, and trying your lines. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of wonderful student-made projects at the end of this little tiny PowerPoint. So hang on. Okay, so this is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And what I would say to a student who wants to create a box that communicates the setting of this story, I would say, look, do you notice the up and down lines? What kind of shapes do you notice? And they will likely say half circles. I see circles. I see ovals. Rectangles. That's not an oval. Rectangles, and so on. And I will say, look inside of the windows. Look at the texture inside of the windows. Notice there's a lot of lines going like this, and think about that. So we're just looking. And then I will show them, look, this is how an artist translated that building just with lines into a drawing. Your drawing does not have to look like this. It can be much more simple, but this is just to give you some ideas how an artist might translate. Okay, then we'll go back into the story, and I might show another drawing. This is from one of the book covers. And this is Claudia and Jamie. And, as the story goes, Claudia wrangles her younger brother into running away from home because he has saved up his allowance. He's more frugal, so he can pay for the bus, and which is sort of funny. And so Claudia and Jamie head to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and they hike up the stairs, and they're going to go inside of this museum, and they're going to get caught up in this really fun and amazing mystery. So I'm just showing different pieces of art that is becoming fodder for my students. So the first thing to do, I say, sketch an idea. And so, use a pencil. I always recommend using good quality art materials with your students. Give them real drawing pencils. You can get these on Amazon. You can go to the art store. You can go to Michael's. Give them decent pens. Sharpies are really good tools. The first thing I always recommend is work in pencil, and then go over your pencil ideas once you're happy with them in ink. This is just like moving from a rough draft to a final draft, right? So you're teaching them and you're reinforcing this skill that they've been learning about every week when they're writing. So you'll notice that box was one of these craft boxes, and we just painted it with a coat of gesso, which I will show you at the end of the PowerPoint. Sketch an idea, then prepare your idea. So in order to make the inside of this museum, we found a bunch of images on the internet of famous works of art, shrunk them down to little postage size, and then printed a sheet out. And then your student can cut and paste those inside of the museum. Whoops, I went the wrong way, sorry. Prepare, construct. So once you've prepared, then you start gluing, and you can see that what we did is we prepared our little micro exhibition inside of the box. Okay, so you can see a little bit more. Now, when we looked at this box, it looked kind of boring on the inside. That bottom of the box doesn't look much like a museum floor. Well, we happen to be remodeling our kitchen at this point in time, and we got all of these samples, which of course I'm saving. They're little tiny linoleum samples, and I'm holding them up. I hope you could see them, but I'll show them again. And so we dropped one of those. It just needed a little trimming, and we dropped it right inside. But you might not have linoleum samples at your house. Use a piece of watercolor paper and have your student just watercolor a floor color and then cut it out and put it in, or construction paper, or, the possibilities are endless. Always, when you think you're done, ask what else. This is a principle of art, and it is a directly transferable skill to writing. Always reread what you write and ask yourself, hey, what else? What else can I do? Okay. And then voila, we have a section 5. So I'm going to stop my share here. Okay, now I want to show you some projects that some of my students did actually this past year. I want to start with section 2. So with the unit loser, this little student found this adorable red box. And, it was just a lidded gift box. Got a whole bunch of package shredded paper, created this little character. I don't want to pull it out, but he's just made out of Fimo clay. But then what I love, always have your students create some sort of writing to go with their section 5. This shows them, it reminds them that writing is an art. And I love the way this student, used pinking shears to clip the edge of the paper, used beautiful, beautiful penmanship, and started off with a wonderful voice. Why fit in when you can stand out? What a hook. Who wants to keep reading? I do. Why fit in when you can stand out? And that is one of the main themes of this book. You're going to have to read the book to see why that hook is so great. So there's a micro project. Now this is another micro project that a student did based on the same book. And so isn't this adorable? This started out as just one of those craft boxes, and the student added wood, made it look like a chalkboard because a lot of the setting is in a classroom, and all the way around the edge wrote Loser, the title of the book. Jerry Spinelli is the author of Loser, and he's a wonderful author. I'm not going to go inside of that one. Okay, so now level 3. I want to show you some examples from level 3. Oh, one more from level 2, sorry. This is from the City of Ember. And this book is about a dark place, and it's about what would happen if the light, kind of went out forever. And so the City of Ember, all the way around this book, all of the way around the box, the student created themes: friendship, family, teamwork. So kind of highlighted the themes all the way around the outside of the box. And then on the inside of the box, created this really fun diorama of, what it's like in the City of Ember in this very dark place. So, so much you can do with a tiny little box. Now I'm going to move on to level 3. The Shakespeare Stealer is a wonderful level 3 book. And here's a box, and I just love the cover of this because it really kind of harkens back to that Shakespearean era. There's, again, around the outside of the box, use the whole box. But what's really wonderful about these stories is that you will see everybody has a different idea, and you start to see voice. So this box is also the Shakespeare Stealer, and this student made a pretty grand effort to make this craft paper box on the outside look like it was made of wood, and all that took was painting it and using a Sharpie to make texture. Okay, and then it has on the front the latch, but the magical part, you open it up and they cut off the back part of the lid and created an attachment that made it look like a hinged box. When you just set children free to use their imagination and to constrain it, and you give them a few tools that you find lying around the house, they'll do something amazing. So the best part of this book, this section 5, is that this student made all these amazing little books, little folios, because Shakespeare, of course, wrote all of these folios. And I can just imagine how fun this was. And each one of these little books, I doubt you can see it, but each one on the outside represents some theme. So that book said family. But look at this book, even on the edge, I'm trying to get it focused, you can see like the time that the student took to create the binding. There's also these little, folded notes, because in this story, Widge is having to spy on Shakespeare and copy down what he hears when he goes to the various plays. So this one just amazing, right? But again, it's just showing them, giving them a little bit of fodder and saying, hey, here's some ideas. Now go have some fun. Here's another Shakespeare Stealer, and I'm sure you know what this is. This is a tiny representation of the Globe Theater. on the back, on the bottom, there's a quote from Hamlet, and it says, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." William Shakespeare from Hamlet. And has a little map of London and showing you where the Globe Theatre would be. Isn't that wonderful? And I love just the foliage around the edge of it. Just some, you know, moss that you might have that you are laying around if you're a gardener. And then inside, it's really hard to see, but I'll turn it like this. Inside, this is where the people would be seated, watching the play. Isn't that wonderful? So those are 3 different interpretations of the same book, but they all are starting with a little tiny constrained box. Can you imagine if you did with even one child 6 of these over the course of the year? You're going to have a little shelf of these little treasures. The last one I'm going to show you is from the Mozart season, which it's one of my favorite level 3 books. It's kind of one of those sleeper books, and it's set in real time, Oregon, and it is a young violinist who is studying, who's practicing to participate in this competition for young people. And the competition is a real competition. So there's a lot of kind of real-time truth to this story, but it goes back into history. The characters are wonderful. So this student used a little book and put music all the way around the edge. And then here we start with the name, the Mozart season, and the author's name. Okay, and then use just some craft stuff that they had. It's multi media here. There's felt, and there's those puffy sheets. I don't know what they're even called, but you can cut them. Glitter. It comes in all different colors. Michael's is a great place. Okay, so the inside of the lid, it's watercolor, just a piece of a print of music, and it's special music I'll tell you about in a minute. And then the student just threw a little watercolor on there, cut it out to fit inside of the box, and threw some Mod Podge on top of it. Mod Podge is a great thing to keep in your arsenal of craft supplies. You paint that over anything, and it keeps it kind of shiny and waterproof. They also did the bottom of the box like that with the music. Okay, so, but what I really love is that what the main character is practicing for is a Mozart concerto number 4 in D minor for the violin. And so this student cleverly just printed that, a piece of that concerto out, and you can see that's it. And then on the back side, she wrote her report. And again, here's her hook. In her music-driven masterpiece, The Mozart Season, Virginia Ure-Wolf invites reader to consider how creation requires vulnerability and brings people into closer connection. Isn't that wonderful? This is the kind of idea that happens when we allow our students to think deeply and to read closely, and to value their ideas. When they do, it's easy for them to reach into this type of fodder. It's easy for them to understand big themes. Okay, so I'm going to do a tiny show and tell now. Put that beautiful little micro box away. So keep a basket, keep a basket that you can just throw things in during week 2 when they're doing that planning worksheet, and just say, hey, here are some things you might want. So it might be a box, and it might be a basket, and it might have the box in it. And your child might ask for something else to add to that. But I always have things around the house, yarn. I have different kinds of thread. Always I have tape and glue sticks. I couldn't find a glue stick this morning though, because I'm sure somebody is using it in my house. That little piece of batting I have in here, my those little tiny linoleum samples that I got. And sometimes even if you're at the hardware store, grab a few paint chips. You never know, those can, be cut and put in these micro dioramas. Sometimes I've had students who want to sew. So, having a needle and a thread available, having felt, having scraps of fabric, that's fun. I talked about always keeping a sketchbook nearby for ideas. It doesn't have to be as fancy as this, they come with spirals. I always have watercolor paper around, and this paper is a little bit, it's a little bit thicker and it will hold water. But if you don't have watercolor paper, cardstock is great too. You can watercolor on cardstock. I really like gouache paints for children because they're water soluble. You can buy an inexpensive set at Michael's. They're water soluble and they can be used thick or thin. So, let your child just play with that gouache paint. Now, I like to prepare my boxes because they look so much more interesting. And here's the tip: buy a bottle of gesso. Gesso is what artists use to prepare their canvases. So you're helping them to use a material that is real, that artists really use. And then with this, you should have a nice big paintbrush. So when you're using the gesso, you just pour it onto a paper plate and then use a nice big brush, even though it's a micro project, because that will help everything to lay down. If you don't, gesso is a little bit pricey, but it's an investment. This will last a dozen years unless you're a painter making big canvas. So if you do a bigger project on a larger box, you would gesso that too. And then it's ready. It's a blank canvas for your child. You can always also paint your box with that same big brush with acrylic white paint that you can get. All art materials are a little pricey, but they are a really important investment. The same as it's better to use a really good pencil when you're writing, something that's going to feel good in your hand and flow. So it's a little bit of an investment, but if you buy the golden brands tend to at Michael's are, the less expensive, but you can buy one level down from this too. So any kind of acrylic white paint or gesso to cover the boxes. Have tools like a ruler around. It's a really great, simple, you want to cut your paper square, use a ruler. Good instruments. So I love Blackwing pencils. Highly recommend these for writing and drawing. I also like the turquoise barrel pencils for drawing. A good range, like a 2B to a 6B. Soft pencils are really good and they erase well. This is a really fun, this is called a brush pen. And they kind of allow the student to pinpoint and kind of thick. I like fancy tools. I like X-Acto knives and scissors. X-Acto knives give the students some rules, show them how to use it, sit by them. You know, younger children should not use X-Acto knives, but older children should become comfortable with tools. X-Acto knives are really great, especially if you have a metal, whatever this is called, ruler. And you can, because you can lean this X-Acto knife up against this on a piece of paper and get a really straight edge. So some tricks. Sharpies, thick and thin, are great. They're super inexpensive and they're great to have around. Colored pencils, Prang, at the very least, Prang colored pencils, and they can go up and become very pricey. Charcoal is fun. A variety, again, gouache paints. I'm trying to think what other items I would have on hand. You know, scissors, construction paper, scraps of wallpaper, scrapbooking, you know, stickers, you know, all kinds of things, miniatures. So I hope that that you've gathered some fodder, and you know, we hope that your student will enter into this concept of idea making and just, you know, never skip section 5.